I wonder if you could kind of give us a window into a tipping point for you and what led to that.
What led to the crisis, you mean?
Well, what led to, well, we could touch on that, but really it's that what you moved through
Yeah,
to
okay.
re-nurture your creativity.
Okay, well, I was going along fine, happily married, discovered directing ads, was suddenly I was, having been very poorly paid for a long time, I was suddenly extremely well paid, overpaid perhaps, but I've discovered directing ads was something, I won't claim to be good at many things, but I was very good at that. The neatness and the tidiness suited me very well. Anyway, I was unfairly dismissed from a big series, and which has involved people I knew very well, and I was very, very hurt. And I woke up on Christmas Eve, 1993, saying I can't see the point of going on. I looked at my office, which was then covered with awards. I won lots of awards, as you mentioned. And I thought, is this my life? 40 pieces of stupid cardboard under glass. Is that it? And I was very depressed, and I started drinking too much and getting overweight and smoking too much and generally being a complete wreck. I was so resentful and angry and confused. And mainly, I just couldn't see why I have everything. You know, we had a cool flat in London, a tiny little country cottage and a car, two wonderful kids and plenty of money. And I couldn't understand what had happened to me, that I couldn't see the point of the meaning. And it was a long time before I discovered I was, just over 40, 42. Interesting, because of Hitchhiker. It was my meaning of life moment. And so I was just very confused. And eventually it took a couple of years. So I thought, well, obviously I'm the problem here. It's me who's the problem. And as a lifelong problem solver, I need to solve the problem of me. And I need to find out, is there anywhere in human history somebody who's got a better idea for going on being alive other than he who dies with the most toys wins, which I basically live by. I didn't think I was. I wasn't particularly egotistical or greedy or vain or anything, but I wanted to be best. I wanted to win all the prizes and so on. And it stopped delivering for me completely. And I thought, this is pointless. So I set out quite consciously to look for the meaning of life. And I started with physics and maths because I didn't know anything about them. And from maths, I discovered Pythagoras, who I thought was the guy who invented the triangle. I'd knew nothing about it. I discovered he's one of the greatest philosophers who ever lived, in Bertrand Russell's words. So I discovered Greek philosophy, and from that, Roman philosophy and Stoicism, and then Zen. And I studied a lot of comparative religion. And this is where the book comes from, is like the enormity of the human experience and the variety of points of view and so forth. And so it was the most weird life, Kerry, because I was at that point an absolutely top commercial director. This is why I got jobs in Hollywood, because my reel used to go round Hollywood, and I used to get offers quite often to shoot major movies. So I would be shooting a cheese ad in Australia or a lager ad in Brazil 1 minute, and then rushing home to read Spinoza and Heidegger in the evenings, or study the Bhagavad Gita, or read about Shinto. Very strange life. And over the years, it was about 10 years, I suppose, after the first 3 years, which were just miserable, the next 7 years was I suddenly had a whole other thing. I went to Iceland, for example, doing some commercials with Billy Connolly. What an amazing country. Everywhere I went, the country was nothing like the cliche I'd been told to expect. There aren't any Eskimos in Iceland. They don't all look like Bjork. It's a very, very civilized, very beautiful, very strange country. And I've completely fell in love with it. And I read all the sagas in the evenings, and I brought home lots of books about Iceland. I read Icelandic poetry. And you thought, gosh, this is the thing that I started to realize. And I thought I was clever clogs at school. I was a scholar and then a senior scholar, and I got to Cambridge without really trying. And I got to be 42, thinking I don't think I'm brilliant or anything, but I'm pretty conventionally smart. And for example, I was the only boy at King's Canterbury. We all had to do an IQ test. I was the only boy, and I was the senior scholar at the time, who wasn't told what their IQ was. Everybody else knew. And that thought, it can only be two things. Either it's so low that they regretted giving me the scholarship, it's embarrassing, or it's too high and I will be cocky if I know what it is. But I thought, I got to Cambridge. I know I'm not a genius or anything, but I'm conventionally reasonably, I'm a safe pair of hands. I'm quite sensible. I get things done on time. And the thing that really came upon with this business crisis, I didn't know anything. I was shocked. I was horrified to find I really didn't know anything. I didn't at the time really know what the difference between a molecule and an atom was. And when I say these things in after dinner speeches, famous CEOs look at the table because they don't know either. If you're not a scientist, you don't know.
Yeah.
Most people don't know that air is mainly nitrogen. Every school child knows that who's done science lessons, but adults don't know that.
Yeah.
They don't even know what nitrogen is, except it comes in packets of crisps. So the thing is, what happened to me was that I spent 10 years essentially in the wilderness, didn't make any television, just ads, making a lot of money, reading a lot of everything, but building a huge collection of books. And then one day I was sitting down to start writing this novel. I thought, well, okay, I've done enough ads now. We've got plenty of money in the bank. We're living in the country with kids in the village school. I can write the book. I've got the time. And literally, as I put my pen to paper, this idea arrived from space and went into the top of my head, like I've often said, like a boiled egg opening. And it was QI, quite interesting. It stands for quite interesting, but it's also the opposite of IQ. It's a different way of looking at things, a back to front way of looking at things. And also QI, Qi in Chinese, stands for the life force. So it really matters. And I've talked about channeling before, but this thing arrived in my head, 3 hours of it. And I started making things. We could do educational videos. We could do radio and television. Obviously, we could do a university chair at Oxford, the chair of interesting. So the Royal Quite Interesting Society. We have a chain of shops. We will start schools, QI schools. It completely changed the way people are educated. I could not understand what had happened. And it happened all over a morning. I wrote it down as fast as I could write. And I called Alex, my best friend, who was then a merchant banker, and said, Alex, he's totally different to me. Alex is sensible, phlegmatic, honorable, straight. He doesn't have mad ideas. He does a job very well. He's a really good guy. And I said, can I come and see you? Because I've just had this idea. I think I've had the idea of my life. And I want another view on it. And so we met in a pub halfway between our houses in Oxfordshire. And I told him the idea of about an hour. And he said, I'll take 20%. I said, well, you're going to give me a lot of money? He goes, no, you're my friend. I won't give you any money, but I'll take 20% and I'll work on it with you. I said, okay. So he spent 3 months. He was, working in a major London bank at the time, merchant bank, privately, secretly on his work computer, trying to work out how much a television channel would cost. We were going to call it the Interesting Channel. And he thought that was the way to go. And at that time, we thought it was going to cost about 20 million, 99, to start one. It never happened, actually. But that's what convinced me that if Alex liked it, who thinks completely different to me, is interested in totally different things, if the two of us agree. And I was so sure the idea was good that I didn't tell anyone else about it for 2 years, because I thought, what if anyone pinches it? The idea that everything in the universe, without exception, is interesting if looked at for long enough, closely enough, or from the right angle. And we're in our 24th year at the moment, 24th series, and nobody has come close to replicating it because it takes so much work.